Have you ever wondered why, no matter how hard you work, true wealth always seems just out of reach? Why some people seem to build empires while others can barely stay afloat, paycheck to paycheck? I used to ask myself that every single day. Until one decision changed everything. I reached my first million not by getting lucky, not by winning the lottery, and certainly not by working more hours. I reached it when I dropped one toxic routine that nearly everyone around me still follows today. And worse, they defend it like gospel. Have you ever wondered why, no matter how hard you work, true wealth always seems just out of reach? Why some people seem to build empires while others can barely stay afloat, paycheck to paycheck? I used to ask myself that every single day. Until one decision changed everything. I reached my first million not by getting lucky, not by winning the lottery, and certainly not by working more hours. I reached it when I dropped one toxic routine that nearly everyone around me still follows today. And worse, they defend it like gospel. Most people are trapped in a routine they've been told is the key to success. Work hard, save money, stay out of debt, and play it safe. It sounds responsible. It even feels secure. But I learned the hard way. It's an illusion. This routine doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to quiet desperation, a lifetime of just getting by. My poor dad was the perfect example. He was intelligent, well-educated, respected in his field. A government employee with a PhD, he believed deeply in the system. He told me to study hard, get good grades, find a secure job with benefits, and retire with a pension. That was his formula. That was the plan. He followed it perfectly, and still ended up financially broke. He saved diligently. He avoided debt like the plague. He never took risks. But despite decades of hard work, he spent his later years worrying about bills and budgeting every dollar. He had no investments, no assets, no passive income. Just a fragile savings account and a hope that Social Security would be enough. He thought he was doing everything right. But the truth is, the system he trusted was never built to make him rich. It was built to keep him dependent. That's the trap. You're told that if you just work a little harder, save a little more, things will get better. But every promotion is met with higher taxes. Every raise is swallowed by lifestyle upgrades. Inflation eats away at savings. Emergencies wipe out what little cushion you've built. It's not freedom, it's survival. Most people don't realize they're in a cage because it's made of paychecks and good intentions. The illusion of security is the most dangerous kind. It convinces you not to question, not to dream, not to act. And until you break free from that routine, you'll never build real wealth. The turning point in my life didn't come with a bigger paycheck. It came with a question. One day, exhausted after another long day at work, I looked at my bank account and asked myself, how is it possible to work this hard and still feel like I'm standing still? That's when it hit me. I wasn't building anything. I was trading my time for money, and time is the one thing I can never get back. It was a harsh truth to face. I was stuck in a cycle most people never escape. Work, earn, spend, repeat. If I stopped working, the money stopped too. My income was completely dependent on my effort, my energy, my presence. And that's not wealth. That's just a slightly more comfortable version of being broke. That was the moment I realized that true financial freedom doesn't come from working harder. It comes from building assets. Assets don't need sleep. They don't call in sick. They don't take vacations. They work for you even when you're not working. Whether it's a rental property, a business, stocks that pay dividends, or intellectual property that generates royalties, assets are the foundation of lasting wealth. Labor gives you income once. Assets give you income again and again. I started to understand that the rich weren't rich because they worked harder than everyone else. They were rich because they owned things that paid them, over and over, regardless of their time or effort. That realization changed everything. I stopped asking, how can I earn more money? And started asking, how can I build something that earns for me? When I made that shift, from labor to leverage, from income to assets, everything started to change. That was the beginning of my first million, not when I earned it, but when I finally saw money differently. The most toxic routine that keeps people trapped is simple: working for money. It's so normalized that most never stop to question it. You get a job, you wait for payday, you pay your bills, and you hope for a raise. Maybe you pick up a side hustle to make ends meet. You celebrate promotions as if they're progress. But deep down, you're still in the same place, trading time for dollars. That's the lie most people live their entire lives around. They think they're advancing, but they're just running faster on the same treadmill. Promotions feel like freedom, but they come with longer hours, more pressure, and higher taxes. A bigger paycheck often leads to bigger spending. The lifestyle upgrades cancel out the extra income. It's motion without movement. I've met countless people who say, "I just need to make a little more, then I'll be set." But when they make more, their expenses grow with it. A new car, a bigger house, better vacations. They're still dependent on that next check, still stressed about the next emergency, still stuck. That's not wealth, that's glorified survival. When you work for money, you're always at risk. You lose your job, you lose your income, your body breaks down, your income stops. It's a fragile system built on your effort alone, and the moment you stop producing, the whole thing falls apart. But money doesn't have to be earned. It can be built. It can be structured through assets that generate income whether you work or not. That's the real shift. Not hustling for money, but setting up systems, investments, and ownership that make money flow to you. The people who get ahead financially are not the ones who work the hardest. They're the ones who break free from this toxic routine. They stop chasing checks and start building cash flow. That's when money stops being a master and starts becoming a tool. The rich play by a different set of rules, not because they were born with an advantage, but because they understand the game. While most people chase income, the rich chase cash flow. While others work harder, they work smarter. They don't look for another job or a side gig. They look for an asset that will pay them for years to come. What separates the wealthy isn't intelligence or effort. It's perspective. They understand that money isn't something to earn and spend. It's something to invest and multiply. They acquire income-producing assets: real estate that generates rent, stocks that pay dividends, businesses that scale without their daily involvement, intellectual property that earns royalties while they sleep. Each move is deliberate. Each decision is designed to build streams of income, not piles of bills. I'll never forget the lesson my rich dad taught me as a kid playing Monopoly. We played for hours. Over and over, the strategy was simple: 4 green houses, 1 red hotel. That was the formula. Buy small assets first, build them up, then roll them into something bigger. That wasn't just a game, it was a blueprint for wealth. And he was living proof. The poor and middle class focus on their paycheck. The rich focus on building the board. Every property they buy, every business they start, every investment they make, it's one more square in their favor. Over time, those assets work harder than any job ever could. The moment I applied this to my own life, everything changed. I stopped spending my money on things that didn't pay me back. I started acquiring assets the way I used to chase pay raises. And, like those green houses on the Monopoly board, they grew, slowly at first, then all at once. That's the secret. The rich don't just play the game differently, they own the board. The first million didn't come from a windfall or a perfect investment. It started in my mind. Before anything changed in my bank account, something had to shift in how I thought. I had spent years with the mindset of an employee, always asking the same question: how can I earn more? I thought more money would solve everything: a better job, a higher salary. But even when those came, nothing really changed. I was still stressed, still chasing, still stuck. Then I asked a different question: how can I acquire assets? That question flipped a switch. It forced me to stop thinking like someone who trades time for money and start thinking like someone who builds systems that create money. The employee mindset focuses on income. The investor mindset focuses on ownership. One is about survival. The other is about freedom. This shift wasn't easy. I had to unlearn almost everything I'd been taught. I had to stop seeing money as something to spend and start seeing it as a seed. I had to stop looking for security and start looking for leverage. But once I did, opportunities started appearing everywhere. That small apartment building down the street wasn't just a property, it was a potential stream of income. That book idea I'd been sitting on wasn't just creative, it could be an asset. That business concept wasn't just risky, it could be the foundation of wealth. The rich don't ask, how much does it pay? They ask, what can this produce without me? That's the mindset that builds wealth. When you stop chasing jobs and start acquiring assets, the entire game changes. You begin to see time differently. You stop measuring life in hours worked and start measuring it in freedom gained. The first $1 million wasn't in my wallet, it was in my thinking. And once my mindset changed, the money followed. Every step after that was just execution. Once I broke free from the toxic routine of working for money, I didn't become a millionaire overnight, but I did something even more important. I started moving in the right direction. My first steps weren't dramatic. They were small, quiet, and deliberate. But each one pulled me further away from the paycheck trap and closer to real wealth. I started with financial education. I read every book I could find about money, investing, real estate, business. I listened to people who were actually wealthy, not just repeating what school or the media told me. I realized quickly that if I wanted different results, I needed different teachers. So I found mentors, entrepreneurs, investors, people who had already walked the path I wanted to take. I asked questions, I listened, and I learned. Then I did something that terrified me at the time. I learned to sell, not because I wanted to be in sales, but because selling is the core skill of any entrepreneur or investor. If you can't communicate value, you can't grow anything. Selling taught me how to present, how to negotiate, and, most importantly, how to deal with rejection. It was a crash course in real-world business, and it changed my life. At the same time, I started making small investments, a little money into real estate, a bit into dividend stocks, even a small side business. None of them made me rich instantly, but they got me off the sidelines and into the game. I stopped thinking like a consumer and started thinking like an owner. And I applied one powerful principle. Pay yourself first. Before I paid bills, before I spent a dime, I set aside money for my future. Sometimes it was just a small percentage, but it built the habit of putting my wealth first, not last. I also began to use debt strategically, not to buy toys, but to acquire assets. Debt, when used wisely, became a tool. I stopped fearing it and started leveraging it. These early moves were the foundation. Not flashy, but effective. They were the first bricks of a financial life I controlled, not one that controlled me. Most people are terrified of debt. They've been taught that debt is dangerous, something to avoid at all costs. That mindset keeps them broke. It kept me broke for years. I followed the advice to save, to stay out of debt, to live below my means, and I stayed stuck. Everything changed when I stopped fearing debt and started understanding how to use it. The truth is, debt is a tool. It can crush you if used recklessly, yes, but when used strategically, debt becomes one of the most powerful forces for building wealth. I didn't use debt to buy cars, clothes, or vacations. I used it to acquire cash-flowing assets, rental properties, businesses, investments that paid me every month. While others were scraping together savings for a down payment on their dream home, I was using the bank's money to buy income-producing real estate. I wasn't trying to live in a better house, I was trying to build streams of income. That one decision changed everything. Instead of waiting to save enough, I leveraged what I had to create more. Here's the difference. Liabilities take money out of your pocket. Assets put money in. I used debt only when the numbers made sense, when the property could cover the loan and leave cash in my hand every month. It wasn't gambling. It was math. And the more I did it, the more my income grew without adding more hours to my day. Every loan I took was like hiring another employee who worked 24/7. The banks gave me leverage. I gave them interest. But I kept the asset. And over time, those assets paid off the debt and kept paying me. That's how the rich use debt. Not to consume, but to expand. Not to live large, but to build cash flow. Most people borrow to look rich. I borrowed to become rich. That's the difference. The road to my first million wasn't smooth. It wasn't some straight line of perfect choices and flawless execution. It was messy. It was full of setbacks, rejections, and flat-out failures. And honestly, those moments taught me more than any business book or classroom ever could. In the beginning, I made bad investments. I underestimated costs. I overestimated returns. I trusted the wrong people. I bought into deals that looked good on paper but collapsed in reality. I remember one property that drained me financially for months before I finally figured out how to turn it around. At one point, I thought I'd ruined everything. I also faced rejection constantly. When I first started pitching my ideas or asking for financing, I heard no more times than I could count. Banks turned me down. Partners walked away. Friends didn't believe in the vision. And every single no hurt until I realized it was just part of the process. Rejection wasn't the end. It was training. It made me tougher, sharper, more focused. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I was cut out for any of it. I had to fight through doubt, not just from others, but from myself. It's easy to believe in success when things are going well, but the real test is whether you can keep moving forward when nothing's working, when the deals are falling through, when your account is nearly empty and the pressure is mounting. Those hard lessons built something no paycheck ever could. Resilience. Every loss forced me to learn. Every failure exposed a blind spot. And every time I got back up, I was stronger. I realized that the people who win with money aren't the ones who get everything right. They're the ones who refuse to quit. They learn, they adapt, they push forward. That's how you earn your first million. Not just with strategy, but with scars. When I finally crossed the threshold and hit my first million, it didn't feel like I expected. There were no fireworks, no dramatic moment of celebration. In fact, it felt quiet, almost anticlimactic, because by the time the number showed up in my accounts, the real transformation had already happened. The money was just the result. What mattered more, what changed everything, was who I had become in the process. The first million wasn't about luxury or status. It wasn't about proving anything to the world. It was proof to myself that I had broken free from the mindset that had held me down for so long. I was no longer stuck in survival mode. I didn't need to trade hours for dollars. I didn't need a job to feel secure. I had built something real: systems, assets, cash flow. My money worked harder than I ever had to again. But what surprised me the most was how little it was about the money at all. That number wasn't the finish line. It was the beginning of a different life. A life with freedom of time, freedom to create, freedom to help others. It opened doors not because I had cash, but because I had confidence. I knew how wealth was built. I understood the game, and I could play it on my terms. I stopped chasing money and started designing my future. I stopped asking what things cost and started asking what they could earn. I stopped fearing failure and started expecting lessons. And that mindset, the habits, the clarity, the strategy, was worth more than any check I'd ever received. $1 million didn't change who I was. The journey did. The struggle, the learning, the risk. That's why I always say, if you're chasing your first million, don't just focus on the number, focus on who you're becoming along the way. Because once you get there, you'll realize the real wealth was never the money. It was the power to create it, again and again. If you take nothing else from my story, remember this. Your first million doesn't begin with a paycheck. It begins with a decision. A decision to stop following the routine that's been holding you back. To stop living on autopilot, trading your time for just enough money to survive. It begins when you choose to break the pattern and build something of your own. Right now, you need to take a hard look at your financial habits. Are you spending your life chasing a bigger income, but never building anything that lasts? Are you saving for safety while inflation eats your future? Are you stuck in the same cycle of work, spend, repeat? The good news is you don't have to stay there, but it starts with dropping the routine. That old formula, get a job, save a little, avoid risk, it won't make you free. It never has. What you need is leverage. You need assets. You need education. You need to move from being a consumer to a creator, from a worker to an owner. Start small if you have to. Read one book, watch one course, save 1%, make one investment. But start. The longer you wait, the deeper the routine sets in. The more you put off learning about money, the more you stay a servant to it. No one's coming to rescue you. No boss, no government, no magic opportunity. The choice is yours. You can keep playing it safe and hope for a break. Or you can take control, start building your financial foundation, and create the future you deserve. It doesn't matter where you're starting from. What matters is that you start today. Shift your mindset. Study wealth. Build assets. Take action. You don't need more time. You need a new direction. One decision. That's all it takes to change your entire financial life. Make it now. If this message spoke to you, if something clicked, even just a little, don't let that feeling fade. Most people hear the truth once, nod their heads, then go right back to the same routine that's keeping them broke. Don't be most people. You now know what's holding you back. You've seen the toxic routine for what it really is. You've seen how the rich think differently, act differently, and build differently. The only question left is, what are you going to do with that? Remember, you don't need permission to build wealth. You don't need a degree, a lucky break, or some secret strategy. You need action. Real, uncomfortable, deliberate action. Start learning. Start building. Start becoming the person your bank account has been waiting for. And if you want to go even deeper, if you're ready to identify the habits keeping you broke and replace them with the ones that create real wealth, then don't stop here. Click the next video. 6 habits that keep you poor and the rich avoid at all costs. I'll show you exactly what you need to drop and what to replace it with if you're serious about escaping the rat race for good. Your financial future isn't found in your past. It's built in your next decision. See you in the next video.